Hello everyone, Mike Zodi here and welcome to Lesson 4 of the Mage Guide series. This lesson will be entirely dedicated to leveling your character in Lorerim. There are plenty of players who play Lorerim that are at a loss on what to do or where to go with their first character in order to gain levels. This is often because they visited locations they would have in vanilla Skyrim and quickly realize it's much more difficult. But don't worry, in this video we'll show you many ways to level your mage regardless of what build you bring to the table. Before we jump right into locations, I think it's important to understand how the experience system in Lorerim works. Unlike in vanilla Skyrim, where you simply use a skill repeatedly to raise its effectiveness and your level, Lorerim gives you experience in other ways. Here are the 4 main ways to earn experience in Lorerim. Number 1. You can earn experience by killing enemies. The amount of experience you earn is based on your current level compared to the enemy level. Usually, the lower your level, the more experience you get. A strategy that some players adopt in the early game is to hold their current level as long as possible to maximize experience earned. This way, when they cash in the experience by sleeping in a bed, they can advance multiple levels at once. Two, clearing out dungeons and locations. There are many locations on the map where enemies inhabit. Examples of these are caves, ruins, bandit caves, forts, and groves. Upon clearing the enemies in one of these locations, the player will be given a completion notice and offered a static amount of experience.
I suggest we meet there in a few hours and see what awaits us inside. That's all for now. Thank you.
Number 3. Completing quests and side quests. Skyrim is full of quests for players to undertake. Lorerim builds upon this by adding plenty more quests and side quests for the player to tackle. This can be as simple as completing a delivery job on the missive board to stopping vampires from taking over Skyrim. Much like with clearing out dungeons, you are awarded a static amount of experience based on the type of quest. Number 4. Doing miscellaneous tasks and objectives. This last one is what I use as a catch-all for anything not covered by the main 3 methods I mentioned earlier. Some examples of these would be reading books, discovering key locations, and pickpocketing high-value items. Though you can gain plenty of experience using these methods, the other 3 are more in line with the general Lorerim advancement. Now that we have covered how experience is earned, we will jump into actual methods of leveling. For this section, we will break it into 2 parts. The parts will be fast leveling and normal leveling. Fast leveling will consist of many methods in which you can quickly gain levels with very little effort on your part. This can quickly jumpstart your character to become battle ready in sometimes minutes. Though you have some control over how fast you level, sometimes these methods may leave you much higher than you may have wanted. Also, new players who skip ahead may not be ready for later content as they never developed crucial battle mechanics and strategies with their build. For this reason, I do not advise any fast leveling for your first character, as it may ruin the Lorerim experience for you. Normal leveling, as its name implies, is gaining experience and level at a normal and steady rate. This offers a very balanced and fun Lorerim experience without sudden spikes and changes. It is the recommended way of leveling that I advise most new players to choose, especially if you are not following a specific build video that offers proper leveling pathing for that build. The first fast leveling method is called the Absorb Knowledge method. As mentioned earlier, reading books can give a player a small amount of experience. However, manually reading every book in a library would take a large amount of time. In Whiterun, the court wizard has a spellbook located in his study room called Absorb Knowledge. This spell, when activated, allows the player to instantly read all books within a small radius. This spell even targets books inside containers such as bookshelves or chests. If you were to take this spell to libraries such as the College of Winterhold or Bard's College, you can quickly rack up a large amount of experience points safely without ever setting foot outside of town. If for whatever reason this book is not there, it may have clipped through the floor. You can simply use a console command to obtain a new copy of the book. There is one word of warning I will give to all players using this method. Using Absorb Knowledge will count as reading a book and will even grant you a skill increase if the target was the skill book. However, some books, such as The Legend of Red Eagle, will normally give the player a quest prompt upon reading it. Using Absorb Knowledge will not give you a prompt, and so a new player may be unaware that they missed out on a fun quest. Even worse, the books are then marked as red, and so a player will rarely pick up a red book to manually read it again. The second method of fast leveling is the Necromancer Start method. In this method, a player will take the Necromancer starting location from the Mara statue. Here, the player will locate and collect the Dwarven crossbow and shot bolts found near the Arcane Enchanter. They will then immediately proceed to the roof, where they will snipe all the hostile enemies located near their spawn. As long as the player damages an enemy prior to them dying, they will be awarded a large chunk of experience per kill due to the difference in their level compared to the enemies. If you are a new player, it is highly advised you do not sleep in this location, as it's not an ideal respawn point for you. The third method of fast leveling is the Ash Spawn method. In order to do this, the player must spawn or travel to Solstein. You can do this by taking a boat at the docks of Windhelm and paying for passage. If you chose a starting location that didn't give you any currency, there is a potato farm just south of Windhelm where you can make about 1,500 septims picking and selling crops. At Raven Rock, immediately outside town, there are ash spawns that will appear and attack the town. Ideally, a player will lure these ash spawns to the town guards. As the town guards tank the ash spawns, the player will contribute damage by their method of combat. This process can be repeated many times until the desired amount of experience has been reached.
What was that? Over here! You'll have to do better than that! Be careful!
Fast leveling with this method is a bit dangerous compared to the other ones due to the chance of a player being killed by a spellcaster ash spawn. For this reason, I would advise a new player to either save the game prior to attempting this, or be very good at the game of dodgeball. The fourth method of fast leveling is an old vanilla Skyrim favorite, the giant method. If you've wandered around Skyrim, you'd eventually encounter a lumbering giant, usually in the company of mammoths. Don't let their slow walking fool you, however. These enemies can actually sprint fast and sometimes even outrun you. But more than their speed, players should be wary of the large club they wield. One strike from this at low levels and you'll easily fly higher than the dragons of Skyrim. In order to successfully level up these enemies, I would advise going outside of Whiterun and locate both the giant camp and the guard tower. Using a range attack, like a spell or crossbow, a player can grab the attention of one of these giants and lure it to the guard tower. Over there, they can use the terrain to their advantage to try and kite and kill the giant for a large chunk of experience. This process can be repeated at many other giant camps provided you have a good rock formation nearby to kite them on. For melee weapon-based magic users, I would highly advise starting with a crossbow and many bolts from the token shop. For mages, I would suggest prepare for a venture spell from the novice alteration perk or a circle of entropy spell in conjunction with an offensive spell. I'd highly advise against using a summon, as most of them usually need to work in pairs to even land attacks efficiently. The fifth method of fast leveling is more suited for the mid to late game. This is more for players who have noticed their experience gains slow down and wish to give it a boost. In this method, a player will utilize the experience from pickpocketing. The amount of experience a player earns depends on the value of the item being stolen. If the item was of incredible value, like a Daedric artifact, then the experience gained will reflect accordingly. For this method, a player will need a spell that can paralyze an enemy, or have a very high skill in the finesse skill tree. Once paralyzed, or with a skill, the player will reverse pickpocket a Daedric artifact into the inventory of the enemy. They will then pickpocket it back into their own inventory. This process will repeat itself until the player has gained the desired amount of experience. And this covers the section on fast leveling. It is now time to help those players who simply wish to play Lorerim from level 1 with no fast leveling options. These methods will be much slower in experience and will vary based on what builds you are using. This is because some locations may be easy for one style of fighting and fatal for another. The first method will be delivery jobs on the missive board. In most towns, you will notice a bulletin board which contains various small side quests that a player can undertake. One type of quest is rather easy and involves receiving an item from an NPC in your current town and delivering it to an NPC in a neighboring town. The player can usually take a carriage ride to this new location, or, if they are feeling brave, they can walk there. Walking has its own set of dangers and Skyrim randomness, but usually a player can travel relatively safe along the roads. I would advise a player to not carry a lot of gold on them, as there is a chance one can be robbed by thieves along the way in the early levels. Also, as long as the player avoids going near animals and NPCs, they can usually make it to their destination without needing to enter combat. The second method is killing smaller critters and creatures such as mudcrabs and wolves. I personally really enjoy farming horkers on my early game mage builds, especially at level 1. They offer a good chunk of experience at that level, and so a player who saves their levels can easily gain multiple levels from killing them. They can also offer a large amount of meat that can be cooked using a torch bash or fire spell, allowing a player to have plenty to eat and sell. You can find a large collection of them near the shorelines by the College of Winterhold. However, I should warn you that although horkers are non-hostile until you attack them, they are easily capable of killing most level 1 characters in one hit, including ones in full set of heavy armor. For this reason, I would highly advise using range attacks and spells such as crossbows and prepare for adventure. If you must attack them with melee, I'd advise a long reach weapon such as a pike and to take full advantage of the horker's slow movements. The third method is Radiant Guild quests, especially from the Companions in Whiterun or the Thieves Guild in Riften. Both of these offers quests that can be very easy to complete for most characters. The Companions can offer jobs where you brawl townsfolk who are wearing cloth armor, or kill animals invading homes of villagers. The Thieves Guild offers a wide variety of jobs such as stealing items or forging logs at businesses. You'll gain experience and gold without ever putting yourself in heavy risk of being killed. For those taking the Thieves Guild route, I will offer a small warning that the entrance to the Riften Ratways can sometimes be dangerous, so please plan accordingly. The fourth method is tagging along with wandering NPCs. Though this method can sometimes be dull due to how slow most NPCs walk, it is still a valid way of gaining levels if you find a chance to do so. You simply find a wandering NPC that looks strong and battle ready and just follow them. More than likely they'll wander too close to a fort or encounter wild enemies. All you have to do is aid them in a fight and you'll gain experience for participating. As an added bonus, these NPCs do not pick up items, so it's yours for the taking. And if your unofficial companion should meet their demise, you could usually flee the scene and return later to loot their corpse for their gear. The fifth method is minor outlying enemy areas. Unlike a full bandit camp or cave, these enemy areas usually consist of 2 to 3 bandits that are relatively easy to kill. Some example locations are the 2 bandits outside Embershard Mine, the 3 bandits at a camp near the Standing Stones, and the bandits just north of Whiterun below the city's mountain. The small number of bandits make them easy for most early builds to handle with proper strategy. Alternatively, you can hire a free follower such as Faendel in Riverwood, and the 2 of you can dispatch these small bandit groups without worrying about biting off more than you can chew. Okay, so now you learned how to level up in the early game. However, some players still struggle on knowing what to do after and prefer having a more step-by-step approach. This next section will be a general overview of an easy Lorerim pathing guide. Keep in mind that I will give you examples, but the final decision still rests in your hands. This is because I have no knowledge what build you are using, so some locations may be harder or easier due to your style of play. However, overall, this pathing is generally safe for new players to follow, as I will target more dangerous areas later in levels. Levels 1 to 3. During these levels, your character is still in the budding stages of their build. You may have a few spells and skills that show your overall theme, but chances are most encounters can still be very fatal. During these levels, I'd advise players to do simple town-related quests such as delivery, brawling, and foraging. You could also consider killing minor critters like horkers. I would not advise engaging with bandits at this point, but if you do, please bring a follower, good set of spells, or good knowledge in combat mechanics. If you are a summoner, depending on which summon you chose may decide whether you need to offer assistance in combat. Levels 3 to 8. During these levels, you should be able to handle an outlying bandit area of 2 to 3 enemies. This may involve using strategy to your own advantage, such as stealth attacks or hit and run with spells. As a clot mage, you need to be very careful of archers as they can easily bring you down in a single shot. You can counter this with wards, armor, summons, and followers. If you find it still too difficult, you can keep repeating the previous step until you can handle these bandits. This is also a great level to range to start exploring the map and new areas. Chances are, you may not be able to clear an entire area, but you should be able to pick off a few enemies to gain some basic experience. If a location isn't too difficult, you can also consider placing a tent and create a respawn point. Even if you die, you can respawn and continue to make progress. Levels 8 to 12. Around these levels is when a lot of your build is starting to take shape. You'll have access to stronger spells and supporting skills. This is an ideal range where you want to consider tackling bandit camps and caves. Once again, do consider proper strategies or bringing a follower to assist you. You are also in a great range to pick up beginner tier quests such as finding Armin's father's sword or talking to the innkeeper for Radiant Bandit quests. Your focus should be to gradually shift off killing enemies for experience and more towards completing quests and clearing zones. This will offer much better rewards in both experience and loot. Levels 12 to 20. This level range is pretty much preparation for the mid-game. During this stage, you will need to consider the direction of your build and gear. It is also important to understand that staying alive is equally as important as doing damage, as dungeons will begin to get longer and more difficult. Making sure you have proper countermeasures for different scenarios is key to surviving. When it comes to quests, you can consider picking up low to mid-tier quests that you will get from most villagers and townfolks. Depending on your build, you may want to avoid quests that involve a lot of mages, spriggans, and creatures of the night, such as vampires and were creatures. I personally like to pick off smaller outlying caves, ruins, and forts. You can also consider doing a various guild quests, as this can be a great source of valuable loot and progress. Levels 20 to 30. At this point, you are pretty much ready for mid-game content. This means you can now tackle some of the more tougher locations in the game. This includes the Agma Infinium questline and delving into Winding Dwemer ruins. For side quests, consider tackling mages, spriggans, and very small groups of necromancers. If you haven't attempted Bleak Falls Barrow yet, now is a good time to make an attempt and see how your build fares against a more challenging dungeon. These areas can still be very dangerous, and some care should always be considered. If your build still doesn't feel ready, you may need to repeat the previous step until the combat feels smooth. There is no shame in bringing additional followers if your build cannot handle the content on its own. Some players even enjoy bringing a team of followers for a more authentic party role-playing experience. Overall, this portion of the game is where you'll start to see some incredible pieces of gear and quest rewards that can help your build. Levels 30 to 40. At this level range, you are in preparation for the late game. Most of your key abilities and perks have been unlocked and your overall style of combat is at its advanced stages. At this time, you will be striving to perfect your gear and making preparations to handle some of the strongest enemies in the game. Make no mistake, some of the later enemies can be very difficult and punishing against certain builds. If you haven't valued magic resist before, you will definitely start valuing it now, as most enemies that cast spells will become more common. It's at this stage you can now start extremely punishing questlines such as the Dragonborn and Dawnguard. Though some player builds may still have been able to accomplish this sooner, I feel that this level range is ideal for most builds to handle the content. The road will be bumpy, but with good preparation, you can overcome most challenges. Some mage classes may even have access to some master tier spells, which can drastically change the flow of the game. Levels 40 and higher. You are essentially in the late game stages. Very soon, you will unlock your master tier abilities and even master tier spells if you haven't found one already. At this point, only the strongest of enemies will really pose a challenge, and you should be able to handle most content the game throws at you. You will still suffer some deaths, but by this stage you'll have plenty of countermeasures in place to help you. There is not much advice I can give you here except to have fun doing whatever you wish. And that concludes Lesson 4 of the Mage Guide series. One of the reasons I focus entirely on leveling for this lesson is because there are plenty of other leveling locations and strategies that I haven't covered. For this, I will turn to the wisdom of the comments section. Anyone watching this video is more than welcome to share their leveling strategies with their fellow players. When doing so, please remember that all players are not using the same builds or combat style. If an area or enemy is dangerous to characters in melee range, please mention this or mention the build you are using so that players have a rough idea of what combat style to bring. Also, there are plenty of magic users that fight in melee combat primarily, so players who know good leveling spots for standard warrior builds can provide their knowledge as it's still applicable. If you all wish to learn more, please stay tuned for future lessons. If this video has helped you, please consider a like and subscribe, as this will help the channel grow. This is Mike Zodia. Have a good one.